Hello and welcome to HD Philosophy, the channel where we take some time with the classics to awaken the hidden dragon within all of you. And this is episode 4 of the Gospel Meditations, where I outline and discuss the insights from my family breakfast as we meditate on this week's gospel message. So sit back and relax and enjoy the ranked match as we meditate on Matthew 18:15 through 20.
Let's go!
If your brother or sister sins, go and point out their fault just between the two of you. If they listen to you, you have won them over. But if they will not listen, take one or two others along, so that every matter may be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. If they still refuse to listen, tell it to the church. And if they refuse to listen even to the church, treat them as you would a pagan or a tax collector. Truly I tell you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Again, truly I tell you, that if 2 of you on earth agree about anything they ask for, it will be done for them by my Father in heaven. For where 2 or 3 gather in my name, there I am with them. So this week's discussion really focused on community and the guardrails that community kind of acts as to the individual person, which led us in our family breakfast to discuss, what does community provide that isolation cannot? Also, what does it mean that when 2 or 3 of you gather, I too will be there? Well, the first part we tackled was, can you be ethical? Can you be good in isolation? Where my grandfather and daughter pretty much said, no, you're not doing anything for anyone else. You can't actually be a good person in isolation. So the bulk of our conversation during breakfast, and then it kind of bled into dinner as well, was about, what does community provide? And again, what does it mean that when 2 or 3 of you gather, I will be there? So what does community provide? Well, for this, I'm reminded of Aristotle. Aristotle, who believed you cannot be good in isolation. We are political and social animals, which means that in order to be the best of individuals, there are some virtues that rely on community. For Aristotle, he saw morality as a craft. Think about a craft like what it takes to build a ship. And this is an example he actually uses in the Nicomachean Ethics. There's a particular craftsmanship of woodsmanship needed to build the ship itself. Obviously, you can't have brittle wood, There's an objective metric to the wood that is needed and the bend that is needed in order to build a good ship. And this also goes for the navigator, the cruiseman, the captain. They are all defined in virtue to what is shipmanship. The same thing goes for morality. When we start to identify what it means to be the best individual, certain duties naturally follow. And for Aristotle, these were the virtues, prudence, justice, fortitude, temperance. These were like the cardinal virtues necessary to be the best of individuals. Think of them as the rules, the fence line, the defining of what it means to be a good individual, okay? So then, if we have these kind of rules and these laws, well then now think about it when it comes to the community itself. The community acts as the referees, the buffer that represents the fence line. They're the ones that allow you not only the grounding to be the best individual, like the laws of football, they also provide the pushback. So that way, when you are moving to extremes, they have a way of calibrating you. So I have to go to an annual conference for my college, and during the conference, I heard a statistic that just blew me away, where almost 30% of new nurses don't make it past their first year. And I can't help but see what happens when somebody's in isolation and doesn't have the pushback, or doesn't go into the world to test to see if what they want to be is actually what they want to be, And this is one of the issues in isolation. You don't get that pushback. You don't get that recalibration right there, that reorientation. As you can imagine, the majority of these individuals probably lived around a bunch of people who just said yes to them all the time. and didn't have one of those friends that actually knows them well enough, wants the best for them, and then pushes back. So you can see they probably provide you with the grounding to be the best individual. I'm thinking of like the decency laws from back in the day, although there could be an argument that they went too far. Personally, I liked when people put a little effort into going out in public. It showed the youth that the adults dressed nicer or had a higher respect for the community, something I think we're kind of losing nowadays. The community was making decisions on what the best of us would look like. Also, there's this communal aspect to the laws being representative of everyone. There needs to be this communal pushback for the definition of fairness. I'm thinking of like a Rawlsian definition of fairness in this sense right here. To allow equal opportunity, that the talented are able to find their areas of expertise. That's a communal effort. It's also a communal definition of law that's necessary. I don't mean sameness in this effect, but rather I'm thinking of this Aristotelian just society where opportunities are allowed so that the most competent can find their area of craft. That's where the liberty comes from there. But I'd say like the one that makes the most sense as far as what the community provides is the outlawing of things that would destroy a person's ability to be the best that they can be. So again, in my medical college, I can't tell you how often drug abuse comes up, because the foundation of the healthcare system, to make the argument of autonomy, is to bring the patients back into an area of autonomy. When they succumb to a disease, there's this argument that they're not fully autonomous anymore. They have become almost cursed by the illness itself, where they're not allowed to make their own decisions or rule their own life anymore. So the restoration of health can be seen in the light of restoring their autonomy. Now, thinking about it in that way, think about what outlawing drugs does then. These drugs that absolutely subjugate a person's ability to self-determination and autonomy, where they can't even think for themselves anymore. They are ruled by this drug now. So in a just society, these kind of things wouldn't be allowed. But it's based on this concept that Aristotle would call a philikon law. Philikon law meaning friendship, a friendly law. And so to understand this, Aristotle's highest form of friendship is what he called the friendship of the good. Basically the same thing we see in Proverbs 27:6. Faithful are the wounds from a friend, but the kisses of an enemy are deceitful. It's like there's a faith you can put in the wounds from a friend. There's the faith that they want what's best for you. The faith that while this does wound you, it might wound your ego, you could put your faith in the friend that they want what's best for you. It is only the kisses of the enemy that are deceitful, the pouring of the honey in the ear by those who do not want what's best for you. So back to the community, back to the area of justice. The community who wants what's best for you is the just community. So you can have faith in the wounds that they place on you in a metaphorical way. When they push back, they're pushing back from an area of love. They're pushing back from an area of wanting what's best for you to be the best individual you can be. And that used to be the concept of the justice of the state, both from Plato and Aristotle. Just imagine that. If our leaders actually ruled with, I want to keep the things that allow you to be the best individual you can be, but you need to have faith in the fact that I'm going to eliminate the things that make you worse off, So that's you cannot be virtuous in isolation part. And we really dug into this because it was like, my family provides the pushback, My wife, she pushes back on the ways I sometimes raise my son when I'm a little too harsh on him. I've spoke about that earlier. She and I talk, and sometimes she's wrong and sometimes I'm wrong. But the way we find out the best solution is by pushing back. And so take that when you talk about when 2 or 3 of you gather, I will be there. Because I'm thinking of it in this way, and this is kind of what came up in breakfast, that it's like, what does it mean when we all gather and we're trying to seek out the truth that he is there? Well, maybe the truth that the influence of the Holy Spirit forms our vision to discover the truth when two or three or more are gathered in his name. So the community, but also that love of the individual, all working together to figure out the truth. For the pastor, he was like, look, no one is smarter than everyone else in this church, you know? And that's fascinating because I was like, okay, I may have my area of expertise, you know? I probably know a lot more about Plato and Aristotle than my congregation, you know? What's hilarious is when I first met one of the pastors at the church, I told him I was a professor of philosophy, and he asked me, what's philosophy? And I was kind of taken back because I had read Thomas Aquinas before that time, you know, one of the doctors of the church, who once said, you know, philosophy is the handmaiden of theology, something that actually started me on my path of Christianity, because as I dug into philosophy, I realized it didn't have the grounding necessary to have any like objective value. I know it's probably controversial to say, but sorry, you all, I actually do think that philosophy needs to have a normative foundation. Sorry for that little interlude right there, but just because I may know more about Plato and Aristotle and clearly more about philosophy than my pastor doesn't mean I know more than the entire congregation. The wisdom of the congregation supersedes a singular individual. I know nothing about carpentry. I don't know what it takes to be an electrician. I know a little bit about mechanics because I'm a third generation mechanic, but I know nothing compared to my uncle, who is a master mechanic at the Ford dealership for the last 50 years, who also goes to that church right there. But see, the wisdom in the whole will always be superior to the knowledge of the singular individual. It'll always be vastly superior. So if everyone is sharing in that knowledge, I mean, then you have a culmination of wisdom right there. You know, I remember a friend of mine. He's a hunter. He does illegal chicken fights. This is back in the day, and I'm not going to mention names here. But this individual and we kind of went to the bar after I sold a car. This is a long time ago when I was in sales. And the person I sold a car to just so happened to be at the bar, and this person really liked me. He liked my intellect, and he looked up to me, and he made the mistake of, when my friend and I were at the bar, he told my friend, man, you should listen to this guy. He's smarter than you'll ever be. And I was just like, I was so taken back by the ridiculousness of that statement. It's like, well, first of all, you don't know enough about me to know my weaknesses. Second of all, you don't know enough about my friend. My friend knows more about guns than I will ever know. He knows more about dogs than I'll ever know. He knows more about like plants, especially local plants in Hawaii, than I will ever know. It's like, there's this egoism that sometimes, unfortunately, I see it in academia all the time, but there's this egoism that we often have where we believe we know more than everyone else. And it's just like, that is not the case, you know? Ironically, though, one of the better examples I saw of this pushback of community, in addition to when 2 or 3 or more of you gather, I will be there, is in one of the episodes of My Hero Academia that I just watched, Deku versus Class A. It's so fascinating because to outline it for people who don't know or don't watch this series, basically Deku is a student hero, but he is going out on his own because he thinks he's strong enough to deal with the big bad enemy alone. But his classmates are there like, don't you understand? You going at it alone may be exactly what the enemy wants. And I think about that often. You know, does the enemy want us to go out alone? Well, of course they do, right? Of course they want us in isolation. Of course they want us thinking that we're better than everyone else. If there's a plan to disrupt and fracture the community, it's by injecting this autonomousness within every individual to believe that they're better alone, you know? But the entire fight between Deku and his class, who decides, okay, we're going to have to fight to bring him back into calibration here, the entire episode is about every student, in addition to fighting, letting Deku know how he was there for them. And it was just a fantastic episode. It even culminated with one of the big rivals of Deku. His name's Bakugo. He's actually the person I play most often on this channel in my Hero Rumble. He actually confesses his sins to Deku and the way he treated him and asked for forgiveness. So what Deku eventually realizes, though, is that his friends aren't an impediment to success. His friends are required for success in the first place. This is the power of community. It allows the Holy Spirit to work through you by keeping you grounded so that you don't go to any extreme. But they also provide you the opportunity to exercise the virtues that allow you to be the best person you can be. All of which are not an impediment to, but a necessary prerequisite for success.
Thank you for watching HD Philosophy. Like, share, and subscribe.